Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to start our first project using InDesign. And when we start the program up, it will start up with this screen, and that'll give us some options on some basic templates. And since we're dealing with print, our first project will actually be a business card. Now before we get started, one thing I wanted to go to is actually the preferences area and show you some of the things that we can change and use as a default. We have basically the interface where you can change the background color and where you work in, which is very nice. Instead of being this stark white, you can choose these different colored backgrounds. There's also default ways that the program will actually work. The measurement system that we'll use is inches for the horizontal and vertical. Traditionally, the vertical is normally done in picas, which requires you to have a pica pole, which is a kind of a ruler that has those measurements on it. But we'll use inches for now, just because everybody's familiar with it. The stroke is usually done in points, and we can go ahead and leave that alone. Like I said, all this just to give you a general idea of some of these defaults every time you use and work the program. Now, for us, when we work, they have some workspaces, which is how the program is presented to us. And for us, we're going to be using printing and proofing. So here's what the printing and proofing workspace looks like. On the top, we have the properties bar, and we have the toolbar on the very left, and our panels there on the right. Now to get more screen space, you can actually make that panel small, just the icons by itself, or you can pull it back out to get a full description on what that panel is. Clicking on the panel will give you all the options and controls that go with that panel. You can customize the panel by going over and selecting any of the different things that you would like to have on that, either floated on the screen or put it on that panels bar on the right hand side. So for example, let's go ahead and take the text wrap, and you'll see that this is a floating panel that we can have that sits over the artwork itself. We can also take that panel and putting it right on the bar, you'll see that little highlight come up, and now it's a functioning part of the panels bar. You can also click on that tab and have it free floating again if you want. That's up to you. Now the toolbar has its own way of collapsing down in case you want to go ahead and make it smaller. On the very top you have that little arrows which will make it very small or expand it out. That's a great way to have some more space on your screen to work with. So to start a new project, we're going to go under File, New, and Document, and we'll have this panel that will show all the different templates available to us depending which tab we have selected on the top. Now let's click on the Print tab to see all of our templates available to us. Whenever we work with a print document, there are some options on the right hand side, such as width and height, whether the document is going to be portrait or landscape, number of pages, facing pages, and things like margins, which is the area between the main content of a page and the page edges, bleed, which is printing, that will go off the edge of the page. Or a slug. A slug is usually non-printing information, such as a title and date used to identify a document. If you notice, we don't have a business card option on here, but if we click on the See All Presets, you'll find the business card now towards the bottom. And if we go ahead and click on that, you'll see all the options that we have on the right hand side. This is going to be a single card, so we don't have to have facing pages. Let's go ahead and set the margin 2.125 of an inch, and we won't have no bleed or slug lines, so let's go ahead and leave those as the defaults of 0. Okay, we're not going to need them for this project. Let's go ahead and click on Create, and then we'll have the page come up. Here's our page, and if you notice that little pink line that goes right around that edge, that is our margin. That is our spacing between the edge of our page and our information. Now let's go ahead and make it a habit that when we're going to start a new project, that we go ahead and make a folder for it, and we're going to save the document down. So let's make a folder, and we're going to call this Business Card Demo. And same thing for the name. Let's go ahead and give it something meaningful. So we're going to call it Business Card Demo. Okay. And let's save that down. And so that we have an initial setup, and make it a habit of saving our document periodically as we work on it. Now I want you to go to Rudy's place, because we're going to take a graphic from there and use it as the basis for our business card that we're going to build. Now under Resources, you'll see we have all sorts of stuff for you to look at, which is great, but I want to go down and we want to find the business card sizes and the example that I have on the screen. You can take a look at that other stuff later. But if you go down beneath the paper sizes and envelope sizes, you'll find there's a business card example, and that's the actual graphic that we're going to use for this project. Let's go ahead and let's copy, and it's actually right click, and we're going to save that image down. And I've already saved it down once already, but we're going to save that image down, and we're going to use that as a template and recreate the card using InDesign. Now, since this is a business card for the company Google, we're going to need a logo for Google. And if we go all the way down to the bottom of our resource page in Rudy's place, you'll find a wonderful website that we can go look for a logo, and it's called Brands of the World. And I love this. It's a wonderful resource for tying all these different logos. And you'll find the link for that at the very bottom. Go ahead and click on that link, and it'll bring up the web page. And you'll see some examples of these different logos that you have access to. But we also have a way of searching for a logo at the very top here. So let's go ahead and click on that search bar, and we're going to put in Google, and we're going to do a search for it. And when we do, you'll see there's different logos that are out there that have the word Google associated with it. But there's the one that we want to use. So let's go ahead and click on that, and we can download that. Let's just go ahead and click on I agree, and click on that download button, and we'll save that as a graphic for our project. Now let's switch back to InDesign, and we're going to start placing this graphic on here, but we want to use it as a template, and we want to put that graphic on a layer. Now layers is basically kind of like a stack of cards, where one is on top of another. And we're going to create a second layer using our layers panel. Now to create a second layer, all we have to do is click on that little plus on the bottom right hand side, and it says create a new layer. And when we do that, we have one, and it usually will stack it on top. So now we have the two, but to make sure that we know which layer is what and what it's used for, we can actually rename it by double clicking on it. And let's go ahead and double click those layers and give them names. And one we have artwork and the other we have template. So now we have that distinction between the two. So let's go ahead and using the template layer, we're going to place our graphic in here now. And we're going to use the under File, Place, or the keyboard shortcut Command D. You'll see those keyboard shortcuts on the right hand side. It'll be good to actually learn those as time goes on. They become real handy for you. Now if you notice, the place has that dot 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 after the command, and that means that another dialog box will come up. And this is where we'll choose our graphic to actually place in there. So go ahead and click on the graphic you want and tell it to place. And you'll see that we get a little representation. And if you just click and let the file drop onto the page, it'll drop at 100%. Okay, and you can tell this is really huge. So let's undo that for a minute and back up and see the other way of placing a graphic, which is you click and drag. And as you click and drag across the page, it will proportionately place that graphic onto the InDesign document. Now we're going to zoom out a little bit using the zoom tool, which is that little magnifying glass, and we're going to go out onto the page, but instead of clicking, it has that little plus on it, which means it's going to make it bigger. We want to go the other way, which is holding down the Option key or Alt key, and clicking it will zoom out. Now let's click on the black arrow or selection tool, and that will allow us to move the graphic around. And let's go ahead and move, well, let's get this layer panel out of the way here for a second. Now if you notice that the graphic really doesn't look that good, it actually looks kind of pixelated, but we can fix that. Over on top under View, you'll see that we have something called Display Performance, and the default is Typical Display. But if we switch over to High Quality Display, the graphic looks much better. And click on the graphic and hold the mouse button down. We can actually move this graphic around. Now we need to resize this, so let's use the Properties panel to help us out. With the graphic selected, we can go up to the top, and on the left hand side you'll see there's a reference point, and by clicking on the upper left, that's what will reference the graphic to. Now if we go ahead and click on that percentage size, we can actually use our arrow keys to size it up. If you click the up arrow, you'll see that we can now control the graphic size-wise 1% at a time. Okay, and I'm clicking and moving the graphic over to the very edge, and we're going to size it to fit our template. So let's go ahead and size the graphic and position it until you're happy with the results. Then what we'll do is once you get that in position where you like it, we're going to turn around and we're going to lock that layer down under the Layers panel. And you'll see that on the left hand side we got the eye. That's to turn the view on and off. But on to the right of the eye, if you click on there, a little lock will appear. And that will allow us to not move this graphic around. And that's what we want. We want to be able to work on the artwork side, but not move that graphic. So let's go ahead and lock that down, and we'll be ready to start building the card. Now before we start that though, I wanted to point something out. The only thing touching that margin is a type on the lower right. Nothing else is touching that margin. Not on the top, not on the other side, or the bottom. Now if we click on the W on your keyboard, that'll take us to the preview mode, and you can see what the layout will look like without the margins or guides or anything on the screen. If you look at the card, you'll see that it really looks like it's unbalanced. And that's because of the margins themselves. So we'll fix this when we recreate this card. Now to start editing this card, we need to turn around and switch layers from the template layer to the artwork layer, because the template layer is locked down, so we can't make any changes to it. So let's switch over to the artwork layer, and then what we're going to do is we're going to first fix that margin. Now if you remember, the margins looked a little imbalanced, so let's go ahead and let's just increase that margin from 1/8 of an inch, or 0.125, to 1/4 inch, which is 0.25. And if you notice that the margin, when we do that, on the top, on the left hand side, and on the bottom, they pretty much touch, except for the right hand side, which is where that unbalanced part comes in. So we'll fix it by moving the type on the right hand side in. So let's go ahead and let's select our graphic, and let's click and drag that graphic on here, and we'll just do best guess on sizing. Now sometimes the graphic will come in where it's not fitting into the frame, and what we can do is we can either make the frame bigger, or we can use the properties panel to size the graphic to fit that frame. We want to make sure that we want to fit the frame to the graphic and not the graphic to the frame. We don't want to stretch it. Now go ahead and let's position it and size it so that it's pretty much as close as we can to what the other logo is sized at. Now you can tell by looking at the letters that I'm pretty darn close to being the right size. Now we just have to go ahead and center that graphic onto the business card, and we can do that by using these alignment tools here on the top. But we got to make sure that we're aligning not to the selection, but we align to the page. So using the align to the page, we can now go in and click on center, and that will center the graphic on the business card. Centering the graphic to the middle of the page isn't really going to work for us. So we'll nudge the graphic up using our arrow keys so that the logo aligns up again. We are ready to start putting the type onto the page. And to do that, we're going to be using our type tool, which is that T. And everything is frame based in this program. So we're going to have to click and drag to create a frame, a text frame, to start typing in. Now we'll make a frame all the way across those margins from side to side, and we'll use that as a centering mechanism later on. So let's go ahead and click anywhere in the frame, and let's go ahead and start typing. So we'll put Larry Page on here, and he's the CEO of Google. Now there's a couple of ways to select all the type once you finish typing. You can either click and drag to select all the type, or you can click and hit Command A, which will select everything for you. On the top left, we have our list of fonts that we can choose from, and you can see that Larry Page is on the right hand side as an example because it's selected. So let's go find a font that is pretty close to what we have, and Arial will work for us. So we have that selected, and it applies that font to it. And then we have an alignment center here as well, so we can go ahead and center it. And you can see that the name itself is pretty darn close. Okay, but we need to go ahead and change that to bold. And then the CEO will work, except that it's just a little large. We'll need to go ahead and make that font just a little smaller. And we can change the font size and the leading, which is the space between the sentences. We can adjust that up and down. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that and make it a little bit closer. And that's not bad at all. We can work with that. So let's go ahead and turn off our template layer, and you can see the difference between the two layouts. And it's starting to look pretty good. So let's go ahead and save what we have using Command S on our keyboard, and let's continue on editing. Let's go ahead and make the address part. Let's use our type tool again, and let's click and drag a new text box so we can start typing the address in. Let's go ahead and size it the way you want, and let's go ahead and put in the text. Now that we know that the font is Arial, so let's go ahead and select Arial Regular, and let's go ahead and start typing that out. http:// Now we don't need that slash at the end. We technically don't even need the http:// anymore. Today's browsers will do that for us automatically. Let's go ahead and leave the HTTP there for now. I've sized the font down a little bit so that it actually fits better, okay, according to the template. So let's go ahead and put in the rest of the address in there. Now we can adjust the sizing and the leading just like we did at the top. Once we're done with all the information, we just make it fit a little bit better once we have it all typed out. So let's go ahead and finish up that side. And once we have that done, then we'll go ahead and make our adjustment so that it fits a little better according to that template graphic that we're using in this example. Okay, got the information there. Let's go ahead and bring the type size down, and let's go ahead and position it a little bit better, and you'll see that we're pretty darn close to where we should be. If we turn off the template layer, that'll give us an idea of what it looked like, and it's not looking too bad at all. So let's continue on and do the rest of the information. What we can do too is we can make a copy of this text box. Since we now know that the font is correct, the size is correct, the leading is correct, we can go ahead and use that just by making a copy of it. Using the keyboard shortcut Command C and Command V, that'll get our copy. Let's go ahead and position it up to the side so we can see it. And we're just going to go ahead and now put the new information in there. Now when we're working on business cards, a lot of times they will email you the information over, which is great because all you have to do at that point is just do a straight cut and paste from the email directly into your layout. And that'll save a lot of time typing and running the risk of making mistakes. Now, of course, whenever you do a business card, letterhead, and envelope, you want to go ahead and give them a proof for them to look at for approval. That way, everybody knows what the card is going to look like and all the information on there, and that gives them the responsibility to make sure that the information is correct. Let's select our type and align it to the right so that it matches the template that we have. Now the one thing we're going to be doing different is that we're not going to line it up on the right hand side. We're going to actually move it in so that it's in that margin, and that way it'll make the card balanced. Now we can align both the text boxes by holding down our shift key and selecting both of them and making sure our line is to selection, and click on where it says align to the top. That way we know that the text boxes are perfectly aligned to each other on the top of the box. And then we'll just kind of nudge it down a little using our arrow keys so that it's sitting within the margins. And if we now look at the preview and see what it looks like and hitting our W key, you'll see our finished business card with all the information and the updated logo. Make sure that you save your InDesign file, and we're basically done with this business card project. In the next video, we'll learn how to make a letterhead using this information, and finally an envelope. And we'll see you in the next video.